So first, I really want us to start with just taking a breath and sighing with relief. This is really important in case you've forgotten because it's a way to turn on your parasympathetic system so that you're able to relax. And once you're relaxed, and I don't mean you may physically feel instantly relaxed, but once you send that signal to the brain to relax, you stop getting those stress hormones flooding you, which a lot of us are having a lot right now. Even in the last couple of days, more changes, retractions of changes. It makes us tense. So let's take in a breath. So taking a breath through your nose, and when you let it out, I want you to sigh with relief. So in through your nose. Let out a big sigh, please. We're all together here this morning. There's nothing happening to us right now. So I want you to remember that. We're just going to spend some time together having a little conversation. So basically, how we talk and listen, again, are always important, whether we're together physically or not. But when we are under stress, misunderstandings are easy to experience. So we're going to talk about why that is and why we need to be much more sensitive to how we communicate now that we're all scattered to the winds. So this is basically, I'll give you the whole recipe for miscommunication. One is that stress and anxiety, they render us less capable of effective communication. Virtual avenues of communicating, which is what almost all of us are using now, email, text, and of course, our friend Zoom, are still much more susceptible to miscommunication. And for those of you that are still working in an office or going in part-time, you've got this massive mix. You're seeing different people in different ways. So it just makes it a lot more challenging. And the problem here for teams is that a lack of communication, and of course the uncertainty of our situation now, changing constantly, breeds rumors. So unfortunately, rumors breed trust, rendering communication ineffective. Distrust. So what we're going to be talking about today is this combination of the challenges around trying to communicate effectively and then the problems that come out of losing trust because we're not communicating effectively. So first, let's talk about stress and how it affects us communicating with each other. It plays, of course, a super important role in times of stress and uncertainty, but it's much more difficult to effectively communicate during times of threat and stress. What happens is our brain actually, the processor starts turning down. So when we're stressed or anxious, areas of the higher brain function, they actually shut down, meaning that parts of the brain that are responsible for problem solving, lateral thinking, and creative thinking are dimmed way down or they're actually shut off. So on average, people under low levels of stress can process an average of 7 messages at a time. Unfortunately, once we become we get to higher levels of stress, we can only process 3, which means we are missing vital information. So it's like as the information is transmitted to us through phone or Zoom or whatever it is, pieces are dropping. Technically, our brain's not picking them up. And then on top of that, our self-control and our emotion regulation is reduced. There's evidence now that exposure to stress, even if it's recent stress, but certainly if it's ongoing stress, can reduce our gray matter in the prefrontal cortex, and that's the part of the brain linked to self-control and emotions. So periods of sustained stress, which is what most of us have been under to some degree, also make us alert to hidden dangers. We become hypervigilant. Our brain is looking for what's the next danger that's coming. So this can cause intense emotional reactions, of course, anxiety, impulsive patterns of behavior. And during these periods of sustained uncertainty, we may find ourselves scanning our communications for hidden dangers or triggering messages. And it may not be conscious at all. It's part of our brain trying to keep us safe in what our brain is seeing as a threat. But just start picturing that as you read an email, if you're hypervigilant, you're going to look for any little thing that you can take as an insult or a problem or a danger, not purposely. So please know, I know we're not doing this purposely. So some key points about this. When people are in high stress environments, they typically have difficulty hearing, understanding, and remembering the information. So people under stress typically understand information at 4 grade levels below their educational level. So consider this when you're communicating. And, all of us, or a lot of us, most of us have known each other in our teams or in our organizations for a long time. That doesn't matter. Okay, so it's really important that you start paying attention and keep your language simple. Keep it to the point. Most of us are being overwhelmed with communications right now, so this helps that as well. Just keep your message to the point. Keep it cordial. Be really careful about your tone so that you don't sound rude or upset, and we'll cover that more in a few minutes. Um, People that are in high stress environments tend to actively look for visual graphic information to support verbal messages. So that's because it's a different part of the brain. So since part of our brain is shutting down, the visual part of the brain becomes an active player in processing information while we're stressed. So if you have visuals that represent the information you're sharing, just like I'm doing now, by all means use them. But if you don't, consider breaking the information down into bullet points, short messages to the point. This visually breaks down information and helps the person process it if they're not able to hear or process in the normal way. And if you're sharing information while on a video conference, you could also consider sending the graphic information out to participants beforehand and then screen sharing the information so everyone is seeing it as you speak. So in this case, we didn't send you this in advance, but we will send it to you. But what we are doing, like now with virtual workshops, is we're sending out handouts in advance via email so that people have the work, that they're going to be working on. They can look at it in advance if they want to. That's all helping people to stay focused and to really retain the information better. Now, the gap between perceptions and reality often widens during high stress periods, and that makes us more likely to misunderstand or misconstrue messages. So be aware of this when sending emails or when you're participating in online meetings. You need to take the time now to reread your emails. I am really doing this diligently now because I realized early on, because I had so many emails, I was starting to answer quickly instead of taking a little more time. And you can really send a tone without meaning to. So just reread them before you send them. And also check your own interpretations when you find a communication is upsetting or alarming you. And we're going to give you a little exercise to do that shortly. So, the world of virtual work. There's also virtual miscommunications. So, I don't know if you've ever thought of this, but we interpret electronic messages based on our feelings. So, because we don't have facial expressions, and this is now going to become even when we see each other because we're all going to be wearing masks. So, in the absence of facial expression, tone of voice and gestures, at least when we're in person, we can kind of get the tone of voice. Although if you've been trying to communicate with a mask on, you know that that's not easy either. You kind of have to shout a little. So we're changing our tone, right? So we really have very little help or support in discerning what the other person is trying to tell us. You may recall from when we talked about telecommuting that only 7%, I think it was 7% of what we communicate comes through the actual words. So we're missing all of this other information. And then because we don't have all the clarifying cues, we start filling in the blanks and with our customary worries and assumptions, right? So if we're prone to feeling criticized, and this is really very common now, even if you're not being criticized, a lot of people are feeling this because they feel like they're not doing their jobs as well, or they're not parenting as well. We're all under different levels of stress. And so that's starting to make us feel a little less great about ourselves in some way. So that means we're going to be very prone to feeling criticized. So if somebody says something that you can interpret at all as a criticism, that's how you're going to read it. If we're nervous about being rejected, evidence confirming this will be discovered. And when I say evidence, I don't mean it's real. It's not fact. It's something that our brain is looking for to say, oh, yep, they are rejecting me. And then if we're anxious about demands being made on us, which almost everybody is again right now, because we're all in the same situation, right? We're all trying to figure out how to do a great job under unusual circumstances. That causes anxiety. So then sometimes messages can come in and it feels like an imperative. So if you're already feeling pressed or overworked or just taxed with trying to keep up with juggling home life, work life, everything else that's going on, somebody could say something very simple to you, like, could you take care of this for me? And it may come across to you as them demanding that you do it. Again, this is not a conscious effort. You're not trying to, create a problem. It's again because our brains are on this sort of high alert. Now, to complicate matters, our relationship with the specific person who sends the message, whoever just sent you the message that's upsetting you, perhaps, our particular thoughts and feelings about them are also going to inform the way in which we fill in those blanks, right? So if you already have the feeling before you even start communicating that this person is inflexible and they're probably already annoyed with you, guess how your conversation's going to go, whether it's online or on video or on the phone. It's not going to go great. So, what we believe is being said may have very little to do with what the author intends to communicate, if it's an email or a text. So, we can't necessarily stop this instantaneously, but I'm hoping by being aware of it, you can kind of catch yourself. So, before you get on a phone call, before you send an email, before you send a text, take a breath. Check your own work before you send it out. And when you receive something and you read through it quickly, as you feel yourself starting to make assumptions or getting flustered or whatever it is, again, step back, take a breath, go back and look at it. I just had this happen. What's today? I don't know what day it is like everybody else, but I think it was Friday or Thursday. I had a message from a client in Canada who I have preconceived notions about. And so I read her email and felt a little irritated. And then I gave her what she asked for. And then I got another email back saying, now we've decided to completely change directions. And again, I could feel myself getting irritated. Well, that's going to interfere with my communications with her, right? So I had to step back. I got to vent with my staff a little, going, okay, this person does this to me. I need to really get a grip on how I'm responding. And then I was fine after that. But you have to be aware. Now, think of this communication. It's very simple. And it's about cookies and milk, for goodness sake, right? But imagine this message was sent by a spouse with whom there is sometimes strain about what time each of them is going to return home. Then glad you'll be here soon could be certainly misinterpreted, right? It could sound like it's being sarcastic or, not very nice, versus perhaps the person who wrote this is feeling really cozy toward their partner at that moment with no awareness of how their words might be received. Now imagine the same message is being sent by a kindergarten teacher to her assistant, and that assistant is already harboring some resentment or feeling exploited. Then it might be interpreted as an expression of the head teacher's entitlement as she asks her assistant casually and without an apology to take care of something that she forgot, right? So on the flip side, the teacher may be feeling fine, is trying to be breezy or collegial, or never suspecting that the note was causing her assistant to seethe. And this happens multiple times every day. We send out, and you know what, if you can't think of it quickly as far as work, you can certainly probably think about it, certainly probably, but you can probably think about it in your personal life. You say something and the person that you say it to gets offended and you're like, what? I didn't mean anything by it. And then when you say that, they go, oh, see, obviously you did. And it just turns into a crazy miscommunication. So this is just an example of that. All right. So in case you've forgotten, we do live with blinders on. We cannot process all of the information in the world around us because our prefrontal cortex can't handle it by any stretch of the imagination. So our brain is always looking for patterns to save that processing power. And this results in us literally seeing what we expect to see. So in my case with my Canadian clients, what did I expect? I expected her to be kind of a pain because that's our history in the past. And then what happened? She sent a message that I immediately interpreted as confirming that she is kind of a pain. All right. So if we keep thinking a negative thought about something, we're going to find the quote proof of it because our brain is going to look for it until it finds it. Doesn't matter how obscure it is. If we're expecting certain behaviors or attitudes, whether it's from coworkers, supervisors, staff, it doesn't matter. We're going to find it because that's what our brain wants. It wants to find that pattern to fit in so the brain doesn't have to think as hard. So check your interpretations. And here's what you can do. So just like with that email, when you get an email that you get triggered by, that you feel like, oh, I cannot believe she's saying this or doing this, instead of reacting, write down your interpretation, your reaction to that message. Just jot it down or type it on a piece of paper. It doesn't matter. But anything that caused you to feel upset or angry, and write it all down. Don't judge or edit yourself. No one's going to see it but you. Jot it down. And then after you've written your experience, go back and underline every line in that writing that is an actual fact. Okay? Not an interpretation, not a judgment, not an assumption, but just pure fact. Underline it. And then when you go through each of those facts, ask yourself, do you know that's a fact for sure? Because again, we tend to think of our assumptions as facts, but they're not. Okay. So you're going to underline and then edit, make sure you only have the facts underlined. And you're going to be like, do this. If you even do this one time, it's going to make a huge difference in your awareness of communications, because you want to be really rigorous, just like you're an editor at a newspaper. So edit out all the judgments, assumptions, anything you can't absolutely know for sure to be true or fact, anything you can't prove with a source. And you got to take out any assignment of motives or premature conclusions. Write down the facts that survived this questioning. And what you will find is you've got about 5 words left. It's all, we're making it all up. So the exercise of considering distressing emails and texts from a different perspective highlights really how often and thoroughly our understanding is shaped by our own emotions and imaginings, and it's got nothing to do with the intent of what was sent. So once you allow for this recognition, it gives you the possibility to compose a more measured and less defensive reply. Now, if you don't want to do that, I really recommend you try it just one time. It really is startling how many things we interpret. But if you don't want to do that, then you at least want to pay attention to what we're talking about in the exercise you did, because that's really going to tell you that you may be making it up. Okay. And I don't mean making it up in a negative way. I mean making up because you're filling in blanks. So we want to be accountable for our communication. And employees know miscommunication happens across their workplace, but they don't think they're part of the problem. And this speaks to Martha's question. Okay. It's kind of startling. So in a study by Quantum Workplace, 81% of employees felt that miscommunication occurred in their organization. And this, of course, was pre-pandemic. But only half of those people said they were directly involved, which, okay, they were directly involved either often or in some way directly part of the problem. And the other half said they were never or almost never or rarely directly involved, which of course the numbers don't work, right? Communication takes 2 people. So you can't have half the people saying, well, I had nothing to do with the miscommunication. That's not possible. So we have something called a self-serving bias, which is our tendency to distort the perception, our perception of ourselves to maintain or enhance our self-worth. So people often want to have a favorable view of themselves, which is a positive thing. That's good for us. But that it can go too far where we distance ourselves from a problem, such as miscommunication, and that allows people that are doing this to reason that they're not to blame. Everybody else is. So it's never my fault, it's your fault. So if a problem emerges, then blame can be attributed to another source. It's somebody else's fault, or it's due to some position level. And that's really trying to defend our own self-worth. But in this case, it's ultimately harmful to us, because not only are we breeding more miscommunication, but then we are actually lowering our worth, quote worth, to the team or to the organization. So again, it's just a matter of being aware of it. Like if you right now think, I never miscommunicate, I implore you to step back and think, is that possible? Because it's really not. It's just the way our brains work, and we can override that. So reflect on how you've taken in the behaviors we've discussed so far. Do you recognize any of them yet for yourself? Or do you think it's only your supervisors, coworkers, or staff that do these things? And I'm smiling now. You can't see me, so I hope you know that wasn't a judgmental comment. Okay, so we want to practice communication accountability. So it's really important. We want to accept responsibility for the messages we send and the way we interpret messages that we receive. So you just want to, again, invest a little time before you hit the send button if you're the one sending out information. And keep in mind, you can't control how your messages are interpreted. That's not up to you. But by putting in a little extra effort to be clear and cordial, you might save yourself a lot of time and misunderstanding down the line. So it ultimately improves both our workplace efficiency and our morale. Another thing that you can do is digital mirroring. Oh, that's a hard word to say. So when you mirror someone, okay, mirroring, as you know, is like modeling in a social phenomenon where we mimic each other. And since we are communicating in all these different ways, we have to kind of take it beyond that and include the style of writing to some degree. So if we're mimicking someone's words, posture, gestures, that usually is enough to help get things in sync. And we also do it unconsciously a lot. But if we are not seeing each other, or if we've got a mask on, or if we're even on a screen, it makes it more complicated. So one way to practice digital mirroring instead of just mirroring is by adopting the communication style of whoever you're communicating with. So let's say you have staff members and they are direct and to the point in their communications. So then respond similarly. So in that last message that you did the exercise on, if that's the way the supervisor normally talks, or that's the way the staff person talks, then you can respond in that manner, because that's clearly they're to the point. Get it over with. Let's move on. Not anything personal. But if you are talking to someone who's much more casual or much more collegial, and you don't say good morning or how are you, or you don't check in with like how, they have children, and you don't say how are they doing, things like that. Then if they're direct and to the point, that other person may feel offended. And that's kind of what that last email was like. It's like, this person isn't thinking about how I feel. They're bringing up all these scary topics that they should know are going to stress me out. And again, we're making that up, right? Because that's what we do. But if you kind of match the tone when you're answering, then it might help improve those communications. And then, it's asking a lot. I'm saying kind of think of what the other person's preferred communication style is. But just like in person, we do that all the time. So we can start practicing doing that digitally. And then remember to just keep checking your own interpretations. So whenever you find yourself reading something into an email or a message, try separating the fact from the fiction that you're telling yourself. Remember, your emotions are affecting the way you're looking at it. So all of this, of course, is leading to some challenges right now. At the root of all of this is really that our current situation is very highly emotive, and it's destabilizing. You cannot plan anything. Every day we're waiting for news. We don't know what's going to happen next. And it's not uncommon for us to assume that leaders or organizations should be making decisions and telling us, frankly. And that's not the case in this case, and it's not their fault. Okay? So in situations where uncertainty is high and there's not physical evidence, there's nothing to point to go, well, now I know because this happened, I know what's going to happen next. Not true in this case. So people turn to communication to try to find stability. They're also looking for socially derived interpretations of events and their meanings. Guess what's happening? We don't agree. So, like everything, for whatever reason in our country now, everybody's divided. So when you look to your social circle or your social network or your team or your company, everyone is not on the same page. And you're going to see this a lot more in the coming weeks, because some people are saying, like, open everything up now, let's go. And other people are saying, whoa, it's way too early. And some people are saying, well, of course we all have to wear masks. And other people are saying, I am never wearing a mask. So it's, instead of it giving us that stability, it's actually making us feel more unstable right now. So in this situation, communication is one of the primary methods we can use to manage reactions to the event. How and what is communicated is going to set the climate for either more uncertainty or assurance. And right now, I think we've had a lot of uncertainty. And that's not, again, it's not anyone's fault. I'm not assigning blame in any way. This is the weirdest thing I think probably any of us have ever experienced. But let's look at it from the perspective of our organization. So due to that hierarchy that exists in most of our companies, those in different positions tend to have different understandings, perspectives, and thus reactions to changes, right? So during periods of organizational change, which is on a lot of people's minds right now, staff tend to face more uncertainty and desire more information. And then on the flip side of that, managers feel they can't meet the need. Okay? They don't want to mislead people or provide inaccurate information. So it's very common during something like this, not just like this, because we haven't done this before, but in a time of organizational change, it's really common for management or leaders to pull back and be quiet. And they're not doing it, in most cases, to hide information. It's because they don't want to give out misinformation. And in a situation where everything is changing, sometimes more than once in a day, it's like when Barbara Ferrer came out with the 3-month comment and everybody went crazy, and then immediately, everybody started backtracking. So it's very hard to come up with firm answers or direction because none of us know what's going to happen. So that's creating a lot of communication problems. And this is one of the big ones. Staff may be making assumptions that management knows what's going to happen and they're not telling them. And again, absolutely not true I don't know of any cases, but I would say even in general, for the whole country, not true for 99.8% of the companies because they don't know yet what to do. Unfortunately, when we feel uncertain, then what happens is rumors start. Okay, so as the rumors start, and we do this, rumor mongering is an attempt to deal with anxieties and uncertainties by generating and passing stories and suppositions that explain things. What do we want? We want an answer. No one's giving us an answer, so we'll make one up. And again, this is the way our brains work. It's not that we're consciously trying to create disharmony on a team, but what can we do? We don't know the answer, and our brains do not like that, right? So it's pretty expected that there would be rumors now starting to float around. And we can look at these. Rumor mongering is just a window into people's anxieties. It's not about the truth. Even the stories people are making up, they don't know if it's true, right? So the only way to really address rumor mongering, that is a very hard word to say, is through transparency. But before I even go further into this topic, when I say transparency, I am talking about the ability to share information that is accurate. And so I'm not saying if there's not information shared that somebody's being non-transparent. I just think it's important that we understand this. So rumors, again, are born out of uncertainty, which is only reduced by the introduction of frequent and consistent information. And because stress arises more from perceptions than the actual change itself, realistic information should assist in addressing stress and uncertainty. So right now, the biggest problems, the biggest challenges, and the biggest source of rumors is, when do we go back? Or now the newest one is, are we going back? Nobody knows. Okay, I promise you, I'm telling you the truth. Even if companies think, nope, we know what we're going to do, we're all going to be back in the office, and it should be no later. I just had a company earlier this week say June, and then the very next day they announced 3 more months, and then they sort of took that back, which means I don't even know now. I don't think anybody knows now. But the point is, you can't have it both ways. So you could have somebody tell you, here's the plan, and you may not like it, or you may like it, who knows. Even that plan doesn't really mean a lot. So what we really have to do here is to start to look inward into how can we manage our anxiety and accept the fact, this is a hard one, but accept the fact that we have no choice but to just go day by day. And I know, I understand our brain doesn't like that. Our brain wants certainty. But in fact, what's causing all the stress is us trying to guess what's going to happen. Right now, most of you are not stressed with your job. You've got the hang of it, whether you're working at home or working in the office, or you're a hybrid, or whatever your circumstance is. You've gotten the hang of it. We've all learned how to go grocery shopping with a mask on. We've all learned how to stand in line 6 feet apart. Things are, and I'm using this word very loosely, but we have normalized living like this. We know we can't go out to certain places. We can't shop. You can't get anything delivered on time. Okay, all of those have become like the new norms temporarily. So we've normalized that, and we were doing okay until people started talking about opening back up. And now we're back into high anxiety again. And that totally messes up communications, because we didn't have a lot of rumors when everything shut down. I can tell you from the feedback I got. Now we've got rumors floating everywhere. And that's because everybody's trying to guess. So let's just review this now in that context, which is that leaders do play a large role in the flow of communication. And of course, want to make staff feel confident that they're being transparent. So if you're able to, as a leader, if you're a supervisor or a manager or a lead or just a general leader, you want to share information as it comes to you if you can. Don't wait until you have the full picture to share information or changes with your staff. By the time you do have the full picture, staff have probably already heard some version of it from somewhere else, but it starts to erode your own trust and credibility a little bit, because they're looking to leaders to guide them. And I can't tell you how much or how little I know your organizations probably have certain rules or policies of what you can and cannot share. But if you're not allowed to share something, then at least share that with your staff. I know that they're talking about certain things, but I've been told I'm not allowed to share it with you yet. But I promise you, as soon as I can, I will. With my staff, when I find things out, I share it with them with the caveat that, I don't know for sure, but here's what I heard from the county, or here's what I heard from first five, or here's what I heard from, and I try to make sure they know like where the source is coming from, and that we always remain in the forefront of our minds. Keep in mind that it could change tomorrow. So it's really not very helpful information, but I think it helps us all build that trust that all of us are in this together, and we'll try to go with the information that we have. Now, leaders want to include the communication of information that is known, statements regarding issues that are not yet known, which is right now most of ours. If there's any time parameters, if there's any uh, answers to questions people are asking, explanations as to why some questions can't be answered. We're really just trying here to make sure that no one feels like information is being withheld from them, or that somehow they're, plotting behind the door and they're going to surprise you with information. We don't want that to happen, because that's not what anybody's really doing. That's us making that up. But remember that the communication process symbolizes the organization's concern for its employees. So we all want to make sure. I actually talked to a manager at a company, an HR manager, who had not thought of explaining that before a return to work, the highest priority would be safety, because she assumed everybody would know that. And that's easy to say when you're in a normal state of mind, but right now, most of us are not in a normal state of mind. So it's things like that where we need to be really careful in thinking through how, whatever we're communicating, are we taking into consideration how the recipient is feeling? And I don't mean we all have time to consider every emotion or feeling somebody has, but in the case of whether we go back to work, don't go back to work, go to the grocery store, don't, whatever, get your hair cut. The point is, there has to be a level of trust. And that is certainly true for our teams. And the way we build that is by being as transparent as we can. It's also important to understand, as the employee, if you're not a manager or supervisor or lead in a lead role, if you have something on your mind, please ask your supervisor. Don't fill in the blanks yourself. You may not get the answer you want, because all we want is a date. I don't think any of us even care anymore what we have to do. We just want a date to know when it's over. No one has that answer. So if that's what you want, it's not your manager's fault they don't have that answer. But at the same time, if other things are going around, you've heard rumors, or you're feeling uncertain about something, or you think you're going to be sent back to work and want to talk about what that looks like, then just ask your manager. And if they don't know yet, because most don't, that's okay. Ask the question. The manager can tell you, I don't know yet. They're still trying to figure it out. But then you're aware that she'll let you know, or he'll let you know when somebody knows. So I'm just going to briefly go through this, because it's really important, again, about transparency. It's so essential for trust. And what we need right now more than anything is to trust each other. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but I feel uncomfortable in public now in the masks, because I no longer can tell, is it a friendly face or a foe, right? And I don't mean literally, but it's very hard to tell now, or to read what's going on. So on our teams, we want to make sure that trust is very strong. It's built on our past relationships. We know we can trust the other person, even if it looks like they're not smiling through a mask, or if the tone of the email sounds too harsh. So all relationships are built on and sustained by trust. So it can also be broken or destroyed by trust. So that's why it's so essential for effective teamwork. So you can't maintain a cohesive unit if there's no trust between team members or between individuals and supervisors. So if you feel that any of this is starting to bubble to the surface, then that's something that really needs to come up in your next staff meeting. Regardless of your role, bring it up. Let's talk about it, or call us if you want to have a coaching session, or if you think that your team needs a specific type of training. It's just really important that we don't allow this to get out of control. And the way it's going to happen now, unfortunately, is by miscommunication, right? Because that's the only way we're staying in touch now, is virtually, for most of us. A little reminder about the top trust breakers. So covering up mistakes, gossiping. Gossiping is kind of part of rumor mongering, right? So we want to be really careful not to do that. So if someone says, hey, did you hear that they're going to make us go back to work, and they're not going to do anything special to keep us 6 feet apart? Okay, that is pure fiction, and you're spreading gossip. So if you hear something like that, instead of saying, no, I didn't hear that, you need to say, that doesn't sound right, but let's wait and hear, from the official word before we start worrying about it. Hoarding information, leaking confidential information, micromanaging, sending mixed signals, shooting the messenger, shutting down other people's ideas, taking credit for others' work, throwing others under the bus. I think for most of us, most of these are not a problem. I think gossiping is a problem right now. Micromanaging may be a problem as people deal with their sort of insecurity of not knowing how to manage remotely. Not criticizing that, but if you need help with that, by all means, contact us. Sending mixed messages, that's the big one now. It's truly going to be the thing we need to focus on the most. So just kind of start thinking about if any of these things have happened on your team as a result of the COVID-19 disruption. Or in some cases, if you hadn't yet resolved some of this before the disruption, then it's going to be exacerbated now. So how are we doing on time? I want you to just kind of think about the difference between how you feel about a person you trust and how you feel about a person that you have low trust in. And this is not for you to do right this second, but this is how you can tell what happens, right? When you are dealing with somebody you don't trust, everything feels hard. When you're dealing with someone that you trust, everything's much easier. So you really want to focus on effective communications to ensure that you're building that trust up or back up if there's been a problem so that you don't end up having a team-wide problem. So there's 10 ways to rebuild trust with communication, and this works virtually as well as it did in person. So again, transparency, be consistent, okay? Everybody's feeling emotional, aggravated, a whole range of emotions depending on the day or the time of day, but try to be consistent in your behavior with teammates and with your organization. Show sincere interest in other people's goals and aspirations. Take responsibility for your own role. If you mess up, fess up. Don't even mess anymore with trying to figure out something else. Just say, sorry, I blew it. Let me start over. Be very respectful. No yelling. I got something on nextdoor.com all in caps with big exclamation points everywhere. That's yelling. Okay. So don't yell on email. Don't yell in text. Don't gossip. Don't belittle, don't make belittling comments. Don't humiliate other people. You want to clarify both emotionally and mentally how you expect to be treated. So if you're having a problem, the other person may not realize that you're interpreting it that way. And so just respectfully share, why that's not working for you. Always under promise and over deliver. Tell the truth all the time. Be compassionate. Be quick about it. Just say what you mean and mean what you say. Focus on intentionally seeing the best in the other person. So when you get that email that your first reaction is not a good one, stop and try to see the best in that person. Would they really do that? Would they really want to upset you? Do you think that was really their intention? And again, ask, as always, ask for feedback and receive feedback. Be open to it. So try not to take it as a personal insult. If you ask for feedback, be willing to hear the feedback and do something with it. Now, we want to have compassion. The world has changed and it has been difficult. So if you have coworkers, supervisors, or staff that have not dealt with the change well, try working on forgiving them. And if you have not dealt with it well, try forgiving yourself. If you at this point are struggling with how to manage this, then it's time to really ask for some help. But in the meantime, forgive other people and forgive yourself because everybody's doing the best they can under the circumstances. The most essential elements to develop a very healthy, fulfilling relationship are trust and communication, and it doesn't matter if you're at work or at home. So if some of the recent events have damaged communication in any way, then you really just want to maybe turn to compassionate communication to start healing it. So set the intention to practice expressing your own needs, not in an aggressive way, but in a compassionate way, self-compassionate way. You want to try to sense the needs of others, even if they're not doing a great job of expressing it themselves. You want to check in to make sure needs are accurately being received. What does this person need? Are they really looking for assurance? Are they looking for, attention? Are they, and again, this could be your children, significant others, your coworkers. People are behaving in some ways that may not be clear what they need. So try to see if you can accurately read it. And then provide empathy for people to hear the needs of other people. Okay. So this is asking, it may be sounding like it's asking a lot, but this will actually make you feel better. You also want to translate any proposed solutions or strategies into positive action language. So if there's a struggle on your team, go through these processes and then write down what are the steps that you can come up with together to shift it around into a positive outcome.